Hello, welcome to the July 2nd, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field, or you can submit questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, whether it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that would be helpful. Which operating system you're running, so if you're running on Mac OS or Windows, and which version number of Cubase you're using, such as 11, 12, or 13. That information is often helpful. When asking questions, realize that my ability to answer all the questions in real time may soon be eclipsed. So if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be helpful and appreciated. We'll go through all the questions chronologically as they were asked. We should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after the live stream ends tonight. And if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, I think we're like 38,000 questions. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan for creating a wonderful website from Stockholm. And we also want to give special thanks to Agent K and Jazz Dude that serve as moderators. So they're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. And we also want to give Jazz Dude a special thanks for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, so the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host of the live stream today. I'm presenting from outside of in the United States, from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching this live stream live, or if you're watching it on the replay, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you are, or who you are, and where you're from. It's always fascinating to see different people from different areas, and just for that make up such a wonderful community. We will also, just a quick note, we will be having for a lot of people in the U.S. are taking Friday off for the 4th of July holiday. And we will be doing, I decided to work on the 5th, so we will have our normally scheduled live stream on the 5th. So we will have our live stream this Friday. So if you have time off for the holiday, if you're in the US, you could maybe not juggle work and the live stream. You could do that. Just a quick programming note in our one. I just wanted to thank Teddy Riley for being our guest on the Zoom social meetup. I thought that everyone got a lot out of getting to interact and work and meet Teddy and share insights. And I thought it was just wonderful that Teddy was so open to sharing and, interacting with people. And, I thought it was just, he was super gracious, and I learned a lot of great things from Teddy, and I hope everyone did as well. So I hope everyone appreciated it. I just want to give a special thanks and kudos for Teddy for taking time out of his incredibly busy schedule just to kind of share his career insights and give advice. So, all right, so with that, we will go ahead and get started. So we have a question from Peter. It says, if I may, I would like to take a few seconds to wish his fellow Canadians a belated Happy Canada Day. So proud to live in such an amazing country. Yes, so it's a nice week of patriotic celebrations with Canada Day yesterday on July 1st, as well as the 4th of July United States. So congratulations to all of our Canadian attendees as well, and all my Canadian colleagues. And I always really appreciated my trips in Canada. They're always a wonderful place to travel to on work. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. In Cubase, it seems impossible to record two equal MIDI notes on top of each other. Yet I get sent MIDI files in which, example, two kicks are layered on top, which causes problems, and it can only be heard, not seen. How can I cope with that problem in Cubase 13 Pro? So, MIDI notes are going to be, there's only one MIDI note that one particular MIDI note on that particular channel can only be played at once. So there can't be two MIDI notes at this, two identical MIDI notes at the same time. What could be happening, let me just, is someone may have been just kind of sloppy when they were handing off drum files for you. So if we see something along the lines of this, let me just show an example here. So what happens a lot of times, and I'll just add a MIDI track below. Here, I'll just, so people may, like if they have two different kick drums to kind of layer kick drums, what may happen is you may have something that looks similar to this. So just, let's just say we have kick drums laid out for us, and let's say if I copy this part here holding down my Alt or Option key, and then if I wanted to just take these two events that are layered on top of each other, and if I hold down my Alt or Option key with my glue gun, these can now, we look at it, it looks like one note. And if we will just zoom out vertically. So, but if I move a note here, we can see that there's a note underneath. So if you're suspecting this where you have two notes, so often these may come from different MIDI channels or different devices where you said, okay, I'm going to take all my kicks and put it into one MIDI track. If you run into that and you have notes that are canceling each other out because one note is doing a note on message while another note is doing note off. So a note can either in MIDI can be on or off, but it can't be in both states at the same time. You may want to select that particular MIDI event. Let's come over here to our list editor. And here we could see often that we may have, so we can see, okay, we're going to have these events that are going to be duplicated. So one thing that you could do is come over here and you'll see under functions there will be a delete doubles. So if the same notes are now going on, so now that we do a delete doubles, if we go to our list editor, we can see that we have, if we undo our delete doubles, so we see that, you know, we have beat 4, 16th note 1, beat 3, beat 2, beat 1. So once we do go to your MIDI and choose delete doubles, so again we'll get the MIDI menu to functions to delete doubles, then you could delete any notes that are doubled so that you don't have notes that are canceling in and canceling off. Now sometimes you may run into situations where it could be doubled, but perhaps these notes are on a different MIDI channel. So if we look at this in our key editor and I look at this and we can say, okay, this was recorded on a different MIDI channel, and I will now take these two events and copy them on top of each other. And now we will merge these events. A lot of times people may just consolidate. So now when we look at our event in the list editor, we can see that we're going to have our 8 events, but we see that every other event is set for channel 2. So if I select this event, because these aren't exact doubles, because one MIDI note is on MIDI channel 1, one is on MIDI channel 2. So when we do our MIDI to functions we could choose delete doubles, and now we look at the same part in the list editors. So while a lot of people think that since notes are on top of each other, that they would automatically be deleted, but basically if we look in the list editor, and this could be more of a surgical editor, that we could see that we have MIDI channel 1 and 2, so I could select one of the MIDI channels, and we'll see like a little focus, and you may have to just kind of turn on filters here if you don't see this focus area. So go to kind of the Windows layout, activate this, and we'll just say we'll focus on the event channel. So I want to get rid of every note that's on MIDI channel 2. I just do a Control or Command plus the letter A, select all, and then delete. And now we choose to not do a focus, and at that point we would just have the 4 notes and the doubles would be deleted. But the nature of MIDI is that you can't have the same MIDI note and being on and off at the same time. So probably someone is creating a scenario when they're merging MIDI data that's causing the problem for you. All right, so we see a question from Command Beats. Hi Greg, what is the most precise way to adjust vocal to the right position? When I right click on the timeline, it shows some options, but with which one is the most precise? Okay, so you know, a lot of times when we're dealing with like moving particular events, one of the functions that could make a big difference is if we have snap turned on. And so it's this icon right up top, and you could also turn it on and off by hitting the letter J on your computer keyboard, and we can see that that will turn it on and off. So now if I have my snap turned on, when I move an event, it's only going to move, and I have this set to adjust to zoom, but I can say, okay, now it's only could move the start of the event to the bar, or if I want it to be the beat, so beat 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So we can move it based on the beat, or we can move it based on the quantized value, or based on our level of zoom. So if we just turn this off, we can freely move the event as we see fit. So now we can freely move it and not have it snap. And then when snap is enabled, that way we could just have it automatically snap to the grid. And we could also kind of do this if you wanted to just nudge events. So a lot of times when we want to nudge, if we hold down the Control key or Command key plus the left and right arrows, we can nudge our events. And if we wanted to, you know, have our events, and if you right click, you could open up the nudge palette here if you don't see it, but we could have the nudge kind of linked to the grid. So right now when we nudge, I could say we're going to nudge by beat. So I could select this particular event, and now as I hold down Control or Command plus the right arrow, we can move it to the right or to the left later or earlier in time based on the beat. We could also at this point choose to nudge if we wanted to do this maybe by 10 milliseconds instead. We could unlink the primary time display from our nudge. So if I now choose to nudge by 10 milliseconds, I can just, as I nudge, we could change the values, and at this rate we could actually go down to the sample level, so we could nudge down to 1/192,000th of a second if you so desire, but you could change to a different time format that's independent or link it to your primary time display for nudging. So let me know if that is helpful for you, Alessandro, and thanks for joining us. All right, so we see also from Alessandro question, or I'm sorry, that was from Command Beats, the previous question. So Alessandro has next question. If the audio files in my project is referenced from another location rather than being copied to my audio files folder of the project, how can I copy the audio files that are already in my session? Can I copy the audio files? So if you wanted to consolidate files that are not in the project folder, if we go to the media menu, we could just use the prepare archive function. So I'm going to turn off a preference here quickly. So there is a function, a preference. If you go to editing to audio, you could, as audio files are copied and placed into the project, you could have it automatically copy to the audio files project folder. So that's a great preference to be aware of. But if we don't have that, let's say I'll do a new project. All right. We'll create a new folder. I'll add an audio track. We'll hit record. Now I want to drag an audio file over. Okay, so we're going to look at the location of these two files by going into our pool window. So we'll open up our audio files folder here, and as we slide over, we could see that these are going to be stored into different folders. So what I want to do now, again, is come over here to my media. I'll close this quickly, and we will choose, again, prepare archive. And now as we go to our pool, we can see that both of these are now going to be, all the audio files is going to be going directly to the same project folder in your project. So all the files are automatically consolidated to a single location. All right, Alessandro Braz also asks, how do you map a plugin parameter to a MIDI controller? So it could really depend upon the MIDI plugin, the plugin itself. So a lot of times I will come over here, let's say, and we'll show you if you have like something set up for the MIDI remote. So a lot of times as we come over here, I'll open up a plugin. So let's now if I wanted to map, a lot of plugins will give you the ability to right click, and then you could add directly in Cubase, you could add it to a directly to a quick control slot. You can also, if you have like an instrument track, so let's say if we open up Retrolog, a lot of times you could right click, and many plugins will have a learn CC function. So, but one of the great things is if you have like your MIDI faders are set up for within the MIDI remote, I can come over here and I'm going to right click and I'll say pick up for MIDI remote mapping, and I'll say the sync note. And what I want to do now is move the fader and click on apply mapping. And now my MIDI remote is automatically controlling that particular parameter. So if I say I want my fader 2 here to control the volume of this track, I just right click, pick up for MIDI remote mapping, move the fader 2, click apply mapping, and now I can control the volume and I could control the plugin. So this way we could have kind of a unified experience once you have your once you have the MIDI remote set up and configured in Cubase. So I could control the volume, I could control plugin parameters, all just by right clicking and saying pick up for MIDI remote mapping, and then just moving the particular fader, which adjusts the parameter. All right, so we see Daniel on, says it's fun to match the face of the voice of the production genius last Zoom call. So yeah, it was good to see what Teddy Riley looked like, but it was great to have you on. I'm sorry we didn't get to see you. I don't think you turned your camera on, but it was great to see you on the Zoom social, and hope to see you on the next one. All right, so Fly V is saying, hey Greg, Jazz Dude, and y'all, got my scribbler, my coffee, and my studio attached. All right. Saying kind words from Daniel to Jan for the Cubase index site. All right, so we have, I think Abel did it, just saying, hey Greg, so thanks for joining us in the live stream today. All right, we have Uno Memento checking in from Finland. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. Thanks for joining us. We have Razel Zemini from Denmark. Always great to see you on. All right, so Abel did it. Asks, so why does Cubase stop playing when going to a different window on my computer? Is there a way it plays in the background? Thanks. So it could be that the other window is taking control of the audio interface, like you go to a web browser. Try going to your studio menu, to studio setup, and select audio system, and then just choose to release driver when application is in the background. So it could depend on if the other, so you could try to do that. Just try toggling that. All right. All right, so we see Flyvy's just checking in from Winnipeg, Manitoba in Canada. We hope you had a great Canada Day yesterday. All right, and we have the Sandwich King checking in. He's Collier Salui from Nigeria. All right, always great to see Lawrence from Barn Door Recording. We have Mark Ludmer on. Wonderful to see Mark. Mark is an amazing music industry veteran who's currently living in Grand Rapids. So wonderful to see you on, Mark. I hope you and your family are well. I was just watching your video on Facebook of the deck being built on the lake. Nice job with that. But Mark is like one of the first employees at Alesis back in the heyday. And if you have Rode microphones, it's probably because of Mark and his work that he did with Rode and Event Electronics. So just an industry veteran. So it's an honor to have you on, Mark. All right, Millard Brown from Philadelphia. It's great to be here. He's missed live streams. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Can you explain how to use the channel tab in a key editor in Cubase 13? All right, so let's take a look at it. Okay. Okay, so I guess that this is the channel editor that we're talking about. So, you know, this was added in 13. We can now have kind of a channel editor. So let's say I have a virtual instrument track here that we are listening to. So we'll just come. All right, so now when we want to come over here, we could adjust. So when we see our channel editor, we can adjust, you know, we could have different parameters. We could right click, and then you could have kind of different sections that are available. And kind of the channel settings, the intention is to primarily give you all of your audio for that particular channel. So if it's a virtual instrument, so, you know, we have chord tracks, we have, you know, notepads, Midi plugins, but we want it primarily one inspector that primarily just focused on the audio. So we could have our routing, so we can see our inputs, our outputs, and as we play, if I wanted to adjust the EQ, we could do that. And if we wanted to go to the pre-section where we could do our low cut, high cut filter, or if we wanted to invert phase, we could do that. And if we wanted to access our audio inserts, so let's come over here and let's say, okay, I just want to put a modulation effect So let's put a chorus. And if we wanted to, again, come over here, let's go to our channel strip. So if we wanted to put a compressor and be able to access the compressor, you know, and if we wanted to put like tape saturation on, and if we wanted to add different effect sends, our Q sends, direct routing. So this gives us access to channel settings, gives us access to kind of all of the audio parameters that are available that can affect the sound of virtual instruments, so that we could do all of the audio processing here. And if I wanted to come over here and see the chord pads, my MIDI modifiers and MIDI inserts, that I could have one place where all the audio for audio tracks and virtual instruments could be accessed in the channel editor. So let me know if that makes sense. Jazzy says, great guest and interesting information. Thanks, Teddy Riley. So yeah, I thought it's always really fascinating to listen, getting Teddy's insights. All right, so we have a question. What are the best ways to use VCA faders in Cubase 13 Pro? Okay. All right, so VCAs can often be kind of confused with groups. So but they have kind of two different purposes. So when we want to work with VCAs, and VCAs will kind of mimic kind of like early automation systems before there was kind of flying faders. Okay, so let's say I want to, we'll look at just our drums here. Okay, so, and we look at our drums, and as we do this, all right, let me just, we'll just sell these quickly. All right, so right now we see that we have lots of automation, going on here. So a lot of times what happens, and we hear our reverb on the snare. So a lot of times what we could do, if we want to group our drums together, what happens is we'll come over, and then if we'll right click and we'll say let's add a group channel to the selected channel. So I'll make a stereo group. All right, so as I bring this down, so the group is going to kind of sum all of the sources here. All right, but if we had automation that was going on, and with a group track we could do cool things like, okay, I want to take this and let's go to my channel strip, and I just want to come over here and let's compress all of the drums here. So we could process everything, but the problem gets to be a lot of times when we have automation. So I'm going to add a VCA fader. So when we look at, I'm going to select all these tracks, right click, and let's add VCA fader, and I'm going to add it to the selected tracks this time. Okay. All right, hang on just 1 second. Let me see if it got added somewhere else. I'm just going to reload the project here quickly. All right, so what VCAs are going to allow us to do is, especially when we're working with automation, so again, select all of these particular, all of my drum tracks here. It's not adding the VCA fader. Let me just try on one other project here. This may be kind of fixed in a different way. So VCA faders, first of all, don't sum the particular audio files. So it's not going to sum the sound of the audio. Okay. Okay, so our VCA fader is now added, and I'm going to just activate the automation that's going on. So we can see that I have automation that's kind of going in different motions. So some are going up while some are going down. So if I wanted to attenuate the levels here, we could still see that the automation, while moving the VCA fader down, is just simply that while I bring this down, we still have faders that are going up, and as I raise my VCA fader, that the tracks, the automation can be going in contrary motion. So I could come over here, and the trick we want to do with VCA faders is to automate the VCA. So if I want to come here, I'm going to automate my VCA fader. Okay, so now we have that automated, and let's look at the automation for, let's say, our snare track. Okay, so we see kind of the automation of the snare track here kind of in the brighter color, and then we see kind of below it the VCA fader. So this VCA fader movements will affect the particular tracks that we see here. So this automation. So we almost have two different forms of automation. Now as we do this, if we just kind of click right here, we could say let's combine the automation of the VCA fader and linked channels, and this will coalesce the automation so that we have one level of automation. Now where this also comes in very handy is when we are dealing with effects. So let's come over here. So let's say now I have I add a reverb to my snare as a send. So I'm going to come over to my sends. And what I want to do is we'll select just a snare, and I'm going to add an effects channel. So let's add a reverb to it. And I'll make it kind of a larger, more obvious reverb here. Okay, so now we can see our destination. We have a reverb. So now one of the great things with this is as I bring down the VCA fader, the relationship between the send, between the channel and its reverb, that gain structure is not altered. So if you're using groups and you drop the volume, that's going to affect the balance between the actual channels and their send levels. But here we have the same send levels, and that's not affected with the VCA fader. So if you look at kind of like early SSL consoles, before they, offered flying faders, they would have VCA automation, and this was kind of the paradigm that was often used. So the physical faders didn't move, but VCAs within the channels moved, and it became a popular automation and mixing workflow that's now replicated in the software realm. All right, so we have a question from Japan, from Gaurav Goswami. Hello from Japan. I would like to know extract stems in separator and extract the audio files like drums or bass or vocals. Okay, so we have really all you have to do, and we can do this with Spectral Layers Pro, and I think we have just a quick example here. And I kind of did this in advance, but we'll show you how to do it. So if we have a 2-track recording like we see here, I could select this track, and then you'll see extensions here, and then I just chose spectral layers. So now when I double click, we can come over here to spectral layers, and within spectral layers, there's in new 11, you could just pop over to the modules, and one of those would be unmixed song. But you'll see unmix if you have version 10. And what that's going to allow us to do is to take the different parts of the song, and we could now, at this point, choose, and that would create layers for each of the instruments. I couldn't believe when she smiled and said yes. So this is like almost like taking the eggs out of the cake is an analogy I make a lot. So now if I want to come over here, we could also just say, okay, I want the vocals softer, or I want the drums to be louder. So all of this from like a 2-track mix. So at this point, we could also just say, okay, I want to take the vocal layer. So this is basically each of these different colors is the different instruments, and I could take this vocal layer and drag it over, and now our vocals are completely isolated. So I could drag each element. So this would be like our TV mix, what they used to call. So this would allow us to kind of remix, add more effects if we wanted to. So that's some of the great things that you can do in unmixing, and that's with Spectral Layers Pro. So check that out, and that's an additional sale. If you wanted to just unmix the vocals, there is a Spectral Layers 1 that comes with your Cubase license. So we see from Bratman Studio just saying Teddy, and a nice guy too. So yeah, sure is. All right, wonderful to see Soren on from Sweden. We have Hamo 1974 sending greets from Finland. All right, so we see Thais Andrea says, hello, Cubase Pros. How do you get Cubase 13 to pick up your external synthesizer? So a lot of times when people are working with external MIDI, kind of the traditional method would often be just to have the audio output of the synthesizer, route it into a mixer, and then you would monitor off of the mixer device. So if you don't have a mixer, what a lot of people will do is simply take the outputs of the external synthesizer and route that to an audio input on your audio interface. So you'll need an audio interface that has basically, additional connections. So whether it's digital or analog, usually from a synthesizer, it's going to be analog. You would take the analog outputs of the particular synthesizer into audio inputs on your audio interface. Come over to your studio menu to audio connections, and you could define it as an external instrument. So let's say, okay, I have a Motif XF. I want to connect it into, these other inputs on my audio interface. Once that is done, we could send MIDI out to the device, and then we're going to take the audio out of the instrument back to inputs. So to access it, we would just go to add an instrument track. When we see this, we'll see an external list, and I can say, let's go to my Motif XF, and then I could add it in. But generally, you'd need to bring the audio back in, and this will allow you to run VST plugins. But if you have, I have 23 external sound modules personally, and I have those going into an external mixer, so I don't have to have 46 inputs of my audio interface taken up. So, but you could connect the audio outs directly in and configure it as an external instrument. Or just simply take the audio output and at that point have the audio routed out through a mixer. All right, so we have George ask, will the Zoom meeting with Teddy be available on this channel? I was one of the few who missed the link. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to share a link with you of the Zoom meeting. I will check with Teddy first just to make sure he's okay with people having it, but he wanted it to be recorded. I'm not sure if we'll post it online, but but I'll check with Teddy. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, once I get Teddy's approval, which I don't think will be a problem, I'll be happy to send you the Zoom link, and that's for anyone else as well. All right, so we have a question from Hamo 1974. Can you show step-by-step how to monitor Dolby Atmos with headphones in binaural? Thanks. Okay. Okay, so a lot of times many of us aren't fortunate enough to have perhaps an entire setup of, like an immersive speaker monitoring system, and we want to actually, let's see, or I'll show another project here. It might be easier to understand. Okay, so let's say we want to work in Dolby Atmos and immersive, but we just have headphones for our monitoring purposes. And for the vast majority of people, that's what they're going to be using for their monitoring as well. So let's say we want to take and I want to set up this to actually listen to it in Dolby Atmos. And if you have headphones on, this will probably transmit, I think, even over YouTube for this. So we're going to go to our project menu and we're going to say, let's go to our ADM authoring. And what we want to do is we could run the setup assistant. Before we do this, you want to make sure that your project is at 48K and that your latency and the buffer size for your audio interface is set to 512 samples. So now that we have those things figured out, we'll go to our setup assistant and we'll say, okay, I want to do 714. We're going to add, just check these two things. We're going to add a 712 bed. We'll hit OK. And this will kind of do all of our routing for us and kind of the nightmarish aspect of configuring for Dolby Atmos. All right, so now we'll see our renderer for Dolby Atmos, and we'll see our downmix settings. And at this point, we just want to choose binaural. So once we've done that, we will open up the edit channel settings. We'll go to the panner here. And as I move the panner around, you can hear us. If you have headphones on, it'll be kind of behind you. And then if we want, click on this button, we could adjust the height. So if we want it to be and if we automate this panning, so once you're done the setup, the Dolby Atmos renderer will automatically pop up. And at that point, that's where you would just set the downmix to binaural, and then you're able to binaurally monitor over headphones for Dolby Atmos project. All right, so we see a question from Nutob or Nutob. It says I have a bass drum track C1 and a snare track 2 D1. If I arm both tracks, they record both notes on both tracks. Is there a way just to record C1 on track 1 and just record D1 on track 2? Yeah, so let's take a look. Okay, so let's say now as we do this, I want to have one track that just records the kick and one that records the snare, and we want to separate those. So I will add my second track. Okay, so this is both these tracks are going to, so, you know, and I think the problem is if we record my kick and snare, right? And we stop that when we look at it, that we're going to have, as mentioned, we're going to have the same events, this kick and snare. So how do we isolate it so that it's only the kick on one track and only the snare on another? So we have something we could use called the input transformer, where we could filter out particular notes. I'm going to select this track, and we'll see under the routing of a MIDI or instrument track, under the routing section, we'll see this little kind of squiggly icon. This is our input transformer. So I'm going to put this on the track. We'll open the panel, and we're going to activate a module. So I'm going to say, let's filter out, type is equal to notes. We're going to filter out notes, and we're going to say our subtype is unequal to C1. Okay, and on my second one, so basically what I'm doing is I'm saying filter out every note that isn't C1. And on this track, I'm going to say, let's go to the track. Let's come over to our panel, and we're going to do basically the same thing. We're going to filter out every note, and we'll choose our subtype, because that would be our pitch. That's unequal to D1. All right, and you want to make sure that both of these are checked so that they are active. So if I did everything right, I'll put both of these tracks in record. And let me just... All right, so now as we're in record, so we record both tracks at the same time, and we look, this is only going to be C1, that's my kick track, and this is only going to be D1. So again, go to the little input transformer, you could choose track, and then at this point, when we open the panel, filter out notes unequal to D1 or filter out notes unequal to C1. And then you can only record C1 in this track, only record D1 on that track. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so we have Avanti Jazz says, hi Greg from London, UK. I hope you can answer the question I sent by email about the chord pad trigger notes. All right, so let's take a look at our chord pad since we'll get this done now. Why not? So let's add a quick instrument track. We'll do Italian Sonic. And I think the question was how to here, let me just, it's wrong one. Here, I'll just do a quick piano. Okay. All right, and so the question was, I think they'd found an Arturia beat step controller, and they wanted to reassign the particular pads from the beat controller to trigger different chords from the chord pad. So when you come over here, we can say, I'll just turn off my drums. So we can see that we have like C1 set up, and we could trigger this particular pad. And when we go to kind of our setup, you know, one of the cool things that you could do is we will see kind of the range start. So click on this little icon here. It looks almost like a little MIDI, the chord pads remote settings. And here we'll see what our pad start range is and where the range ends on this. And there is a MIDI learn function. So if you click on MIDI learn, so let's say I want to start at D1. So I'm going to click activate the MIDI learn, click on the field here, so that, and then we should just set my, so, and then when you click on, so do that for the first pad. So click on MIDI learn, you can click here, and then whatever note you hit, when you deactivate the MIDI learn, that will automatically be seen there. So now click on MIDI learn, activate, and at that point you could just set the start and range values directly there. So, you know, hit the first pad on your, I think it's a beat step controller, click on MIDI learn, and then just click on that particular pad. That will set that as the first range, or you could manually set it here. So we see where the blue notes are. This is where the chord pads will start. But you could, if you don't know, if you don't see the actual representation when you're doing kind of more of a drum machine style here, just click on MIDI learn and hit the MIDI note, and then you should be able to hit that MIDI note, and that will assign the start and end for where the chord pads are being triggered. All right, so wonderful to see the artist known as Love on. All right, so we see from Avanti Jazz says, yes, thanks, Greg, for these, along with the index of questions, websites. They're an invaluable resource. All right, so we see from Thais Andrea, hello, is there a way for Cubase to read and pick up the instrumentation on an external synthesizer? So I'm not sure what you mean by the instrumentation. So if you wanted to see like patch name scripts, so if we come here to your studio menu, you could go to the MIDI device manager. Let's see if it's, yeah, go to MIDI device manager, and then you could actually, there are a number of different devices here, and you could make your own patch name scripts. Then at that point, you know, we could say, okay, I want to go to my Chord 05RW, and at this point, when we say, okay, you know, we could say, let's come over, and we'll go to the routing. So we can say our program changes, and then, you know, what you could actually do is I'm going to, let's say, a MIDI track. I'm going to set this MIDI track to my Chord 05RW. So now that we have that set up, we could now just kind of click, and then, so we have that. And once we have that set up, let me just, but you could see different patch name scripts. If you have your instrument set up exactly as you want, you can also record a sysx dump into the program. You might have to go to your MIDI filters under preferences to MIDI filter, and then you could just do your sysx, and then you could do a sysx dump, and that will recall the settings if your instrument does sysx dump. So those are typical ways. But, you know, but most of the instruments, most external synthesizers don't transmit their instrumentation. So if you could let me know exactly what you mean by instrumentation to clarify, that would be helpful as well. All right, so we see Mr. Dali 67 sending hello to everyone from Denmark. Glad you can make it. All right, we see Tim K says he's glad to be joining once again from Zeist. You don't have to apologize for being late in the Netherlands. We're just glad you can make it. Wonderful to see Gareth on. All right. Yeah, sorry you missed the Teddy Riley Zoom. All right. But we're glad you made it today. Hope you had a great weekend. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. Daniel's calling me a kung fu master of dodging compliments. It's always good to be humble, I think. All right, so we have Rick checking in from Whittier, California. Great to see you on the Zoom meetup. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see from Robbie Bowling says, maybe I misunderstood, but I thought you said there was a new version of Console available on the download assistant. I didn't find it, by the way. I'm still on Cubase 12. So I'm not sure, what you mean by console, if it's like the mix console, like, sorry, love that Apple feature. If it's like this mix console that you're talking about, but I don't think that there's a separate download for the console. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Robbie. We're always glad to have you on. All right, we have Tony Trunzo checking in from Australia. Thanks for joining us in the middle of the night there. And we have Club to Breathe from Rio, Brazil. All right, so we have a question. For group tracks, I can adjust the volume right on the track in the event window. Is this also possible for audio or VSTI tracks? That would be neat. Not from the channel in the left zone, I mean. So any track that you have here. So, a lot of times we have events that are on tracks. So when we look at this, and I'll just revert this quickly since we have a lot of what will be confusing automation. All right. So any track that you see, so when we have, let's say if I have a number of tracks here, and we'll make all these, and at this point, so let's say we have these tracks, and when we add, let's say we send them to a group channel, the group channel doesn't contain any events. So when we do this, there's no event that's on the group channel. So when people need to do something, it's probably with the on the project window, it's probably going to be automation. So if you click just right here, we could open up the automation lane for any track and just draw the automation in or set the volume directly there. So just if you click in the lower left-hand corner, this way you don't have to go to the fader if you don't want to. You could just select and adjust the volume right there, but that would just be the automation. So click in the lower left-hand corner directly below the track, and then you could adjust the volume just like that for the events. So let me know if that makes sense for you. All right, so we have Sion B asks, hi Greg and cheers from India. I want to send the output of one track to multiple buses. What's the easiest way? So probably just using send. So let's come over, let's do a new project here. Okay, so let's say I have 3 group tracks, so I'm going to add multiple group tracks here. Okay, so when we look at our mixer, and let me just get rid of my ambisonics bus here quickly. Okay, so I'm going to take this particular track, and then I could just use my sends. So I'm going to say, okay, we want group 1, group 2, group 3. So now when I use the sends here, I could send that to group 1, 2, or 3. So that's one method. If your sends are occupied with effects, another method that you could use is just to come over, and there's something called direct routing, and you could make sure that when you go to your sections that you have direct routing configured. So if you don't need to have send different levels, what you could do is come over here to your direct routing and say, now I want to send it to group 1, group 2, and to group 3. We're going to turn these on. All right, and there is one little, if you go to the mix console, there is a little setting that says direct routing in this little settings window. So we could just say direct routing, summing mode on. So now I could send it to multiple groups just using direct routing as well. So I could send up to 8 groups. Right there, say one track, we could send it to 8 groups. We could use another 8 for sends. You could send this track to a group and have 8 more. So using kind of, aux sends here to send to the groups, or direct routing. And again, to activate the summing mode, go to the full mix console. Let's see if you could. Yeah, so if you go to the full mix console, and you can do this with a keyboard shortcut too, but you can make sure that direct routing summing mode is on, and that way, otherwise it will be sent to one destination at a time. But if this is turned on, it could be sent to, you could have 8 direct routing destinations. All right, so we see from Reginald Carter, says, hello, my name is Reginald Carter from Austin, Texas. I'm new to Cubase 13. I was wondering why the control room feature disables the sample preview. So usually I've had kind of the exact opposite. So, when I have I go to my control room here, and I have my outputs here set to not connected, and now when I go to my control room, I have only my audio outs here are going to my UR24C. So now if I can preview freely here. Make sure that you don't have the volume all the way down. There is a volume control for the preview, so make sure that that is up and not all the way to the left. But generally the control room is where the audio is routed to, since the audio doesn't really have a home yet because it hasn't been placed in a project and during the preview process. All right, so we see inactive user says, hi Greg, how are you today? So I'm doing great, thanks for asking. Looking forward to having Thursday off for our Independence Day in the United States. So it says, my question is, how can I change the routing of existing tracks to a newly created bus so that they all change at the same time, or do I have to make that one by one? Okay, so let's say I want to add a number of audio tracks. We'll add 8. All right, so all these tracks, when we look, they're all going to the stereo output. I'll just navigate down. So we see that all these tracks are going to stereo output. So I want these all to go to, let's say, group 3. So I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option plus the Shift key. And then we're going to say, let's send these all to group 3. And now, as we look, all of those tracks that were selected, the output has automatically been sent to group 3 without any issues, just that easily. So try holding down Alt or Option plus Shift. So let's say I want to send these all to group 2. Alt or Option plus Shift, hold that down. Choose your setting, select the destination, let go, and now all those are being sent to your new bus or audio destination. So give that a try. Let me know how it works. All right, wonderful to see Nick on. The book I'm reading, Nick, has characters going in and out of Essex, so you've been in my thoughts. Wonderful to see Agent K on. Thanks for popping in, saying hi. All right, so we see from Rob says, hi Greg, did I miss a voucher for Halion Symphonic Orchestra to move it to the new licensing platform, or is it yet to happen? So it has happened. So make sure that you are, check your vouchers area of your My Steinberg account. So, and if you don't see it listed, maybe you could email Steinberg and they should be able to get it. And I don't really have access to the account settings, but what I would do is go to your My Steinberg account. But this had migrated like a number of months ago. So if you check out your vouchers area, you should see your options. But yeah, it should be there. If not, you can maybe reach out to Send Steinberg Support an email, and they could look at it in the account system, and they could probably issue a new voucher if you need it. But make sure you're registered for it as well, and see if it shows up in your e-licenser based products. All right, wonderful to see Matt Elston on. Glad you can make it. All right, inactive user says, is there a way to fast highlight my tracks in the mixer view? For now, I'm clicking every solo while holding control. All right, so let's say if I just select these tracks and then I hit S for I thought that would. All right, so let's try it here. So let's, I'm gonna hold down Alt and Alt or Option plus Shift. I'm gonna try that. And then that will solo the selected tracks. So if I have every other track selected here, so let's say, okay, I have this track, skip track, skip track, skip track, and now I hold down Alt or Option plus Shift. We could solo just the selected tracks. So give that a shot and see if that makes sense. All right, so we have Martin checking in from Germany. Thanks for joining us this evening. All All right, great to see Jovanovic 3D from joining us from Sylvania this evening on his time. All right, so we see from Martin, is it possible to automate spectral layers in Cubase? So let me know which parameters you want to automate. Most of the time it's going to be handled as kind of like an editing process. It does particular types of edits and spectral edits, but not necessarily automatable. So I'm not sure if spectral layers itself is automatable, but a lot of ARA extensions, you could automate the tracks, parameters of track before you go in, and then as you do the editing, the parameter like automation for volume and effects would still go on. But the processing I don't think is automatable in spectral layers. Okay, so we see studio and audio connections. I've made a preset for my setup, but how can I make this the default for each new project? So usually the settings I've always found will stick until they are, until they're changed. You could also, once you have everything kind of set up, if you started off as a template, so try saving as a template, and then you could start off with a template, and that would recall like, different effects. Your I/O routing would all be preserved within your template. All right, wonderful to see Pertti Komenen from Finland. Thanks for joining us again this evening. All right, inactive user asks, in the mixer view, there's a mono in which is my microphone input. There I could place inserts. Is that a common way to apply, for example, auto-tune to all my vocal recordings without loading the plugin several times? So, generally I wouldn't put it on the input source. So, we have an audio input, and while we can print, and if we put an effect on the input channel, that's basically, that effect is recorded into the file. So that's kind of burned into the recording. So if you, let's say you get a weird artifact with auto-tune during the recording, because it's trying to pitch correct very quickly it's reacting to what you're singing in real time, so there may be a slight delay in its responsiveness, then that's going to be recorded and you can't undo that. So I would record it dry and then just do your processing if you're using auto-tune, or please investigate like Very Audio. It's a great editing solution for doing pitch correction of vocals. But I would shy away personally from doing that, because once that processing is on the audio file, you can't take it off, and something like that could have a lot of artifacts that you may want to not have permanently on the recording. So you may have like just an amazing vocal take, and if someone's going and they're kind of scooping in notes and they really like that and did it intentionally, and it's being corrected in a way that lost the feel, you can't revert back to that. So I wouldn't put, maybe compressors, maybe some EQs I would put on inputs, but tuning I would probably personally shy away from. All right, so we see from HSP Products. Hi, Mr. Undo. I'm able to extract the MIDI loops from Howling Sonic 7 when I activate chord track and I put the chords I want, but can I extract the new MIDI game which is manipulated by the chord track? Okay, so let's say if we are over here, let me just close this quickly. Okay, so let's say I'm here, and I think maybe what HSP products is cannot extract the new Midi game, which is manipulated. So I guess this might be like perhaps the patterns here from the chord track. So let's say if I want to come over, let's get some factory presets. So now I'm just going to trigger the chords. All right, so what a lot of people, once we load these patterns, a lot of people want to drag this out. And when they do that, they just kind of drag the chords themselves out. So we'll come here. So instead of like what the pattern is doing, so this is the chord that's triggering the pattern. But if we place Cubase into record, so let's go back to our chord pads. So now that we've triggered the chord pads, which is triggering this pattern, and now that we hit record, this pattern can now be captured by the program. So maybe you would have to just record the performance of triggering the chords, which triggers the chord pads, and those chord pads, these arpeggios, are then written into the particular event. So you could just kind of look at it right here. So look at this in the full screen view. So at that point, we could just see exactly what was going on. So let me know if that's what you wanted to do, is to record the output of the chord pads right in, but you could just capture that performance. Right. So we see from Jovanovic 3D as a question, I hear Steinberg is planning a big anniversary sale this summer. Any idea when the sale will kick off and if Dorico is going to be on sale? Thanks. So I've heard rumors of an anniversary sale, like from people on the live stream here. It is Steinberg's 40th anniversary. So, been there going since 1984, which is really ancient for a software company. But but there probably will be a promotion, but nothing has been announced yet. So, but there was just a Dorico promotion just a couple months ago. So there's kind of rolling promotions, and there could be one starting tomorrow. So keep your eyes out for that. All right. All right, so we have Zephaniah asks, how do you create your own preset in Groove Agent using Artist 10 on PC? Okay, so let's say we'll just add a new instrument track. We'll start with Groove Agent SE. And let me just look for some non-copy protected samples. Let me just sorry, let me just okay, so I'm going to come over here. Let's say I just have some snare samples. So we'll open us up. All right, so we have 8 snare samples, and I'm going to drag these across. So different velocity layers. So once I have kind of my own samples in, and I don't think you're able to kind of save samples of like, you know, that come from Groove Agent kits. So just be aware of that. So, but if you have your own samples, once you have these kind of loaded in, we could just say export kit with samples. You could give it a name, give it a location, and then, so we'll see kind of your directory tree here. And then all you'd have to do is just simply save that as a preset. So right click on the agent itself, say export kit with samples, and then give the sample name. You could give it different attributes, where you want it saved to, and then you want to also make sure that you click on export files here. You could choose to protect it, and if you want to do it as Halion Sonic layer, you could do that as well, but you could now just come right over there. Make sure that you choose to export files. It's something that's not as obvious. And that's all you'd have to do to save your custom Groove Agent kit. Okay, so we see from inactive users, says I really appreciate this live streams. They're helping me a lot. Thanks. So glad I'm able to help people be creative. Okay, Sound Keys asks, in Cubase 13, is there any possibility to change the font and size of texts in all fields? So the font is going to remain the same. That could cause all sorts of nightmarish aspects to the user interface, but if you wanted to change the size, it's really dependent upon your screen resolution. So I'm running a 1920 by 1080 screen resolution, or 1080p, and if so, you could adjust that in your operating system. If you're running on Windows and things look too small, if you go to your preferences on Windows, it's going to be under your edit menu. On Mac, it's in the Cubase menu. And on the Windows platform, this is going to be a bit different than Mac OS. You'll see the enable high DPI, and then you have application scaling. So you could adjust the application scaling, and that can make everything larger, including the fonts. All right, so we have John Mooney sending greetings from South Florida. I used to go to Southern Florida all the time. It used to be part of my territory when I was a rep. Yeah, just let us know, John, what part of South Florida you're in. All right, so we have Brian. So your senior says, wow, so busy I forgot to say hello. So we're so glad you did. And always wonderful to have you on from Beulahville, North Carolina. Hope you're going to have a wonderful 4th of July. All right, so we have a question from inactive user. How can I create a pre-master channel so all my tracks goes first to that before routed to the stereo out? So let's say we want to create kind of a pre-master channel. I'll do it. I will come here. I'm going to select all of my tracks in the project. And then I'm going to right click and we're going to say add group channel to selected channels. I'll call this my pre-master bus. So now everything's going to my pre-master bus before it goes to my master out. So again, you could just kind of select all your tracks, right click, add a group channel to selected channels, and that could be other group tracks as well. So if I had all my drums in a group track, so let's say I want to send my drums to a group. And again, I could just select all of the tracks here and add a group channel to selected tracks, call it pre-master, and again. So we could just do it like so. So it's pretty easy to do, I think. All right, so we have FlyV says, quick question. What's the best way to use digital instruments and create drums, but then separate all the kick, snare, hi-hat, etc.? So I'm not sure when you say digital instruments to create drums. So I'm not sure if it's kind of like using, you know, existing drums. I mean, these are all kind of digital instruments. But let's say if we come here and I have, you know, I have this pattern. And let's say as we play this particular pattern here, you know, what we could do is, you know, go to the mixer and then we could say, okay, I want to send this out to output 2, output 3, output 4, output 5, output 6, etc. And when we look at the mixer, we could see that all these. So, and then if you wanted to split, so if it's, you know, this is a digital instrument, I mean, it's kind of a vague description, but if I now come over here and choose, you know, to render in place, that, you know, we could just simply render in each of those individual tracks. Choose my channel settings, and then each of those tracks can be rendered as individual files. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding FlyV. Sorry for my being dense on that. All right, so we have Pastoral Apologetics saying hello all from Southeast Texas. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so we see Thais Andrea says, thank you, Greg, for your answers. With instrumentations, I mean the actual instrument sounds coming from the external synthesizer. I hope this makes it clear. So yeah, I mean, if you have just like a MIDI track here, you can send your program and bank change messages directly here, and that way it'll automatically recall the program and bank change, so that when you load up the project, if your external instrument's on a different sound, it will recall the sound directly from the project that you intended to use. Wonderful to see Michael Marshall from Somerset, UK. We have Tiago, always great to see you checking in from Brazil. And we see Val checking in from Vienna, Austria. And he's watching Austria play against Turkey. All right, we'll let you watch the replay for that. But thanks for popping in, and I'm sure you hit the like button. So. All right, so again, we see from Thais Andrea, in relation to instrumentation, I wanted to understand how to get the sounds from the external synthesizer to play through Cubase instead of using the built-in instrument sound. So again, once we come over here, we add a MIDI track. So if you don't have it set up as an external instrument, add a MIDI track. You want to make sure that the MIDI output port is where that external instrument is connected to. You want to set the correct MIDI channel that it's going to play back on, and at that point the MIDI will go out of Cubase to your external instrument. All right, so we have Jamie K asks, greetings from Canada. How to make all my effects interfaces appear at once on the right, the control room area. I could do it, but still one by one when you click on the camera icon of the plugins. So when you come over here, so I think if we go to your VST effects, so if you don't want to open up each of these little sections all the time, there's kind of a global open and global close. If you run into situations where you add a plugin and you don't see the picture here, you will have to kind of take the picture of the instrument. The plugin, you could reach out to your plugin developers and have them automatically, provide that image file. So it's a result of the plugin developers. They could have the plugin images they want automatically and install those pictures to the correct location without any incident. But since many of the plugin manufacturers choose not to do that, you'll have to take it kind of one picture at a time so that you could see a preview of the graphic user interface from the browser here on the right hand side. And usually, like if I get a new plugin, I open it up and take a picture. So, that way you don't have to do 400 at once. All right, so we see Tiago says, folks, anyone here could point to a nice studio to visit in the UK near Newcastle. I'll be in the UK for 6 months to study music education at Newcastle University. Yeah, so maybe Michael Pierce may be able to, or if Steve Allen is on, or Nick, maybe they could give some insights, some of our UK attendees. I'm not sure if Newcastle is close to in relationship or... All right, so we have Stefan. Says, hi, Greg, and everyone gets Stefan on holiday in a fresh northern Sweden. All right. All right, so Gareth asks, question, I'm a chord pad baby. How do you stop the direct note of the instrument playing as well as the chord assigned from the chord pads? Thanks. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say... So I go to the chord pads here, I activate this. So when I trigger this particular, I'll just load up a different preset here. All right, so I'm going to play a D. So when I activate it here, I'm not hearing the original note. Let me just. All right, so I'm hitting a F. And I will put this to, let's just transpose this. So as soon as I activate the chord pads here, I'm not hearing. I don't hear the original note going through. So let's say I'll do. So I don't think that that note is. So if I want to make this into like a B flat, minor ninth chord. So it seems to me like the original note isn't sounding as soon as I activate the chord pads here. But let me know if I'm doing anything differently than you are, Gareth. But it seems to be kind of working as expected on my end. Bratman Studio says, Greg, the spectral layers in Cubase Pro 13 seems only sure about the vocals and everything else is on a second track. Does Elements 11 select other instruments, or is it basically what we already have? Let me just check. Yeah, so the one that comes with Cubase is only going to extract the vocals. All right, so let's look at the comparison chart. All right, so we have elements in the center on mix modules. So it looks like elements is also vocals only, and the pro version is full. So both Spectral Layers 1 and elements, with the unmixing, is going to be just vocals. So I thought it was, just want to make sure. All right, Mariano Yanez Podoroska asks, what is the best way to use amp rack in Cubase? Should I increase the gain from my interface or directly in the amplifier simulator? So, you know, a lot of times I think a lot of the amp simulators, and I'll just kind of give you an example, one that works well, you know, but a lot of times it's not necessarily getting it so super hot, you know, because the actual, often like, you know, the guitar signal, if you're going into like a high Z input, that will get the gain in a good spot. Let me just see, I'll open up just a project here with amp simulator used prominently. but it kind of uses like, you know, what is the, I think the best gain structure is going to be like what's typically going into your guitar amp. So we'll come over. So just kind of in context.
I'm in the neighborhood. I got some cheap wine. Let's have a good time. I never promised you I'm gonna stick around. But if you're missing me,
so we take these off. So you get kind of, you can look at kind of what the good levels are here. So it's kind of like normal levels, and I think just using, and again, just kind of when we're here, we'll just turn this on. And listen to that in context. So it's not super hot, I would, but you know, I think getting, instead of like boosting artificially kind of at the wrong impedance, I think impedance is important. So if you have the ability, if your audio interface has the impedance of a high Z input, which a lot of interfaces like the Steinberg UR, AXR has high Z inputs specifically, and that is kind of the optimum impedance, you know, which for the output of a guitar or an electric bass. And if you have the impedance right, you should be in great shape just to kind of start with the right gain structure for using any of the amp simulators, including the VST amp rack. All right, so we see from Tony Trunzo asks, hi Greg, when I go to my Steinberg account products and click on Cubase 13, I see computer name that's activated and I don't recognize it. So what you could do is, you know, remotely deactivate that instrument. So, you know, could be someone got your My Steinberg account, or maybe it was just a different computer, but if you don't recognize it, and again, if we go to steinberg.net and we go to your My Steinberg, log in. All right, so you can say, and then you could have deactivate licenses on unavailable computers. So you could do that, but you could look at your Steinberg licensing products and see, you know, and see the computer. But if you don't recognize that computer, you know, go back and you could choose to deactivate the licenses on unavailable computers. So you could do that and deactivate the computer you don't recognize. Okay, so you see Gareth figured out his MIDI controller issue. All right, so Darren Mack says, hello everyone. Do we have any winners from last week's trivia? I answered a question correctly, sent my information. So I'm waiting for Jazz Dude to give an answer. So when I do this, it's always easier to kind of get all of them sent in at once. So maybe if Jazz Dude, if I know he was thinking about what to get, but if we get his in, then I could get all of the requests in for all the winners. All right, so Mariano asks, can I activate lanes for MIDI recording just like it's done for audio? Let's give it a shot. Okay. Okay, so we'll come over here. Let's just do our, we'll say new parts. All right, and we could also do, let's say if I just want to do like stacked here. Okay, so now when I go to lane 2, let's say I'll just all right, so let's say I'm going to choose lane 1, and we'll see if when we record, if it goes into lane 2 automatically if lane 1 is selected. So it looks like it's going to automatically just put it into the next lane. So it looks like it's automatically just placed into the next lane. So, but you know, if you're doing it just like audio recording, so let's say I delete this, you know, I could say I'll put it into like a quick cycle. Sorry about that. And then I think if we want it to be just like audio, we could choose for its, I think stacked, no mute. So here we could see, so now we have it on stacked, and I could use the comp tool. So I could say I want that part from that and that part from there. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to do. But if we go to the Midi record modes, you know, try just putting it stacked, and that will kind of be the same concept as comping audio. All right, John Koskin says, if you've forgotten to hit the like button as your attorney, and it's free legal advice, which is always valuable, he heartily recommends it. All right, so see, John Mooney just saying he's from Boca Raton. So, yep. Let's get to Sam Ash Margate, which is kind of in that area. Remember being there for the store opening. All right, so we have inactive user. How can I pitch down an imported song to make a slowed version of it? I tried with pitch shifter plugin, but there are too many artifacts. Okay. So we'll do a new project here. And we just import quick audio file. All right, so I'm going to take this. Let's do a quick. And I think that this file, I'm going to make sure, see if we have our tempo stamp in it. So we're at 120, 58. I'm going to place it into musical mode. So let's say as we're playing. What I'm going to do is just slow down the tempo. And I'll just take this off my cycle. So as you adjust, so that was like 25% change, so we can now just...
We played our records into the night.
So say I want to go down to 100.
I turn it up, you wouldn't mind.
So probably like a pitch shift plugin I wouldn't necessarily do. I would just kind of choose probably just to take, you know, put it into, you know, musical mode and adjust the tempo from there. So I'm not sure, and if you wanted it to change the pitch, we could change the algorithm. So if we come over here, we could go to your pool, and I'll just say, let's do Elastic Pro tape. So now, like we start at 120.
Up until then,
As I slow the tempo down, it's going to slow down the pitch of it. If you don't want the pitch to change, like an analog tape doing very speed, switch the algorithm.
our musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to choose.
So then you could just kind of change the tempo, and the audio file will play at different speeds. All right, so we see Jamie K ask, hi, is it possible to render a group track, for example, to print external effect chain on a group track? Yeah, so all you have to do is, so let's say if I want to take my group, let's say I have all of my drums here. Let me just check my routing. So I'm going to set all of these to my drum group. Okay, so all my drums are going into my drum group, and let's say I have, you know, external effects on there. All we would have to do is come over here. Let's go to Export, Audio Mixdown. Now the group doesn't contain an actual event, so there's nothing to kind of render in place. But what we can do is when we do our export audio, we can just say, let's go to our group channel. I want my drums. And after export, we want to create a new audio track. And then I say export audio. I'll just give it a different name. Sorry. And if you have external processing gear, it would do it in real time. And I'm going to redo that and not have these selected. All right. So now we'll do our I'll just put something on. I'm going to solo the drums here. And I'll put just like a I'll super compress the drums here on a group so that we can hear that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is again go to Export, Audio Mixdown, and I'll just call this drum group. Select our group channel. I'm going to create an audio track. This will place it probably at the bottom. And now when we listen to our drum group, so that's our drum group that's rendered. And if you want to move it up, you can just have that rendered file right there. So instead of like, because again, there generally is no actual media, there's no object, no event on a group track, just go to your file to export audio mix down, select your group, and then you could just export your group. And if it has the external processing, it just does it in real time. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer says, hello, Greg. I think YouTube 8 questions. Any in my comments? So sorry if you want to ask again. So I see this, could be sometimes if it's too long, but sometimes YouTube just makes questions disappear mysteriously. So sorry, but you could perhaps ask again, or if you want to send an email, I could keep my eye out for the email as well. All right, Amato Solo asks, is there a way to add musical events, audio or Midi, to the timeline away from the playback indicator without stopping playback? All right, so let's take a look. So let's say we are playing. And I'll just add an audio file in. So if I have that playing, I want to take a file and drag and drop. It's not affecting the playback of what's going on. So let me know if you're doing it a different way. If you go to import files, then that will import based upon the cursor position by default, which if it's playing back, could import the file as it's playing. But if you go from Media Bay or the Right Zone Media and just drag it over, it seems to function independently. But let me know if I'm doing it differently than you are. All right, so we have Beast Mode today that says, hey, all, just popped in time. There's some distracting soccer stuff going on. You just have to hit the like button. So, but I guess in honor of Val, we will root for Vienna over Turkey. And if you live in Turkey, let us know, and we'll root for Turkey as well. Okay, sorry. Okay, so we have Neo Dungle Experience. Says Neo here from India. Let's say, suppose if a program a bass track from MIDI instrument, is there a way to create slide bass sound like in real live bass? So it really, sometimes you can do some pitch bend stuff. So let's just open up an instrument just to kind of show this. So we'll open up and this one is kind of sold separately. It's the electric bass, but so let's come over here. Let's say clean jazz bass. Okay. All right, so sometimes you'll have like a pitch bend range within the particular instrument, so you could set the amount of pitch bend change, on like each instrument. You could set the amount of pitch bend change. But I think probably what you want, a lot of instruments, like let's say we're doing bass parts here, we could switch to different articulations. But there's also, like, a lot of the instruments, like the electric bass instrument may have these little types of slides, which is what I think you're doing, what you're probably looking for. So you can come over here and just say, and little slides. So if you want kind of very realistic stuff, but this is kind of designed and built into the instrument. You know, if your instrument doesn't support that, then you can sometimes mimic slides with pitch bend. But a lot of times, if the instrument has these types of added recordings, you know, I think this is probably what you're looking for. So maybe you search out an instrument like the Steinberg electric bass that will be able to offer those types of realistic kind of transition articulations, if you will. All right, so we have Marcello OG sending cheers from Toronto. Thanks for being online this afternoon. Okay, so you see Gareth just with the doubling of the sound says if nothing or all MIDI inputs is checked, it's okay. But if I select my specific controller, in this case, the Samsung Graphite, the direct instrument note sounds as well. So yeah, I can see where it makes sense, but you know, maybe just you know, because at that point it's, you know, taking directly from that, and it's not directly from the controller, and it's not, and that's going in addition to the chord pads as well. So. All right, so Tim Weinheimer just saying hello and says, hope all is well this summer. So we're doing great. All right, so we see Clemens ask, hi Greg, how did you edit in WaveLab, not in ARA mode? Okay, so let's come back, let's say where we had our drums. All right, so I want to take like a portion of this song. I'll do just kind of a small portion of it. Okay, so I'm going to say export audio mix down. And I'm going to do my stereo mix. And then where you see this after export, where I chose create audio track, here I could just say, let's open in WaveLab Pro 12. So now when I export audio, WaveLab Pro 12 will be launched. And the audio mixdown will automatically be loaded directly into WaveLab Pro 12. And there we are. So what you want to do again in Cubase is just come over to export audio mixdown, and you'll see after export, and then you could open it in WaveLab directly from there. All right, so we see from Mariano, just says that was it. Thank you again, sir. So you're welcome. All right, wonderful to see Ace Amadeus on. Okay, so we see from So you see Gareth just says deleted Hallian, instead tried Piano Tech, problem is gone. So, maybe if you had Hallian with multiple sounds open, maybe, Gareth? All right. All right, so HSP products. All right, so I think question again is, in Hallian Sonic there are MIDI grooves, and in the edit program section I can select a phrase, now activate 3 chords on a chord track with the manipulation in Hallian. Is there a way to record the new MIDI? So I don't think we could do it directly from there. Let's see if this... All right. So I think, if we're using the flex phraser, so let's come over here to edit program, and we can see our flex phraser set up here. So right now when we play, and now we could select, let's say our flex phraser. Let me just make sure I have this. Okay, so we see our flex phraser here. So let's say, okay, I want to choose so if you wanted to capture, what you could do, there isn't a way of capturing like from the chord pads here, but if you click on record, what you can do is and then once you kind of click stop at this point, we could drag that into the project window. But that's how the kind of the flex phraser, that's the only way to really kind of get the arpeggiators out of Hallian Sonic into the project window that I know of. All right, so we have Ace Amadeus says, hi Greg, could you please show an example what Steinberg backbone with Sony AI can do? Thanks. So I think it's basically generating kind of like, doing AI for generating kick drum samples. So I haven't done this in a long time, so I may not be able to find it, but let's take a quick look. All right, so let's say if we have but basically it's going to generate, like if we have, let me just try dragging like a kick drum sound in. All right, and then I think if we but basically what it's going to allow you to do is kind of automatically generate variations on a kick drum. Let me see if it's going to be just in, but that's kind of what the AI functionality. So I think if we just click on new here, so this is generating the new sound set. So I think that's what the AI, so you could take kind of a sample and have artificial intelligence kind of go through and do variations on that particular kick drum sound. Uno Momento is disappointed that Michael Teams isn't here giving away virtual ice cream, so maybe he will pop in. But yeah, Michael's only missed a couple of live streams, so maybe he's traveling for the 4th of July holiday in the States. All right, so we have inactive users. Says, can I automate the BPM to turn down with pitch only the last part of my track? Is something like that possible? So sure. All right, so let's say we're doing this. And we have kind of our 2-track going on here, and we wanted to kind of leave them alone. Yeah. All right, so I'm going to activate, and we'll just add a tempo track that we could see. Okay. So we're going to start off at, let's say, so let's say we want to start right there, and we just want to place this track, and we'll set it to, again, to tape. So if we want to automate this going down, I just kind of grab, I'll put this on ramp mode. So now as we do this, so we could automate kind of the So you could just use tempo to kind of automate the pitch and tempo changes. So kind of like a variable, like vary speed on an analog tape machines, but you can automate it and have it play back the same way every time. All right, so we see from Amada Solo, says, thank you. How about copying and pasting events? Let me see if I can find the original. Okay, without stopping playback. Okay, so let's go ahead and give it a try. Okay, so we're in this project. So this is with doing it without moving. All right, so if I come here, you know, doing it manually, I can move my events around. If I copy an event, you know, when I go to paste an event, so let's take it off. When I go to paste, it's going to be based upon the cursor position. So, but if you do it manually, and that's just holding down like the Alt or Option key, you can do that without affecting playback. But if you physically paste, it's going to paste based on the playhead cursor position. So now I could also come here and we could do, so let's say if I want to take this event, I could copy, and then if I do an Alt or Option V, I could paste it to an event, and that would paste it at the origin time and not based on the cursor position. But if I paste, it's going to paste the event start based on the cursor position as the reference point. But you could do a paste at origin or manually move events without it being affected by the playhead position. All right, so wonderful to see Kerwin Young from Atlanta. He says, I'm glad to catch some of the Cubase summer hang with Greg. We're so wonderful, so happy to see you on. We missed you on. We would love to have you on Friday's live stream. We had special guest Teddy Riley. See, John Koskins claiming I showed him how to add 86 dB of pure talent. I thought it was 84, but a lot of that was you, John. All right. All right, so we see Udo Memento wants people to hit the like button. All right, so we see, it says, thank you again, Greg, for the spectacular Zoom meet last Friday. Says, question, can a new spectral layer separate different singing vocalists, or is it dialogue vocals? So it could, there's a function called unmixed chorus. Let me see. I'll do a quick mix down of a song here with some background vocals that is YouTube friendly. Okay, so we have our mix down here of this project. Let me just check, make sure. All right, so let's do a quick unmix of this in spectral layers. So I'm going to unmix the song first. I'm not going to do the highest quality just for time's sake. But I did it on like a Fleetwood Mac song that I can't really play for YouTube. Copyright. And this Fleetwood Mac song did a great job with this. Okay, so we'll listen.
Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to give you their heart. Somebody just the way you are. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that
All right, so we have and it's called Unmixed Chorus. And this could kind of get like the background vocals from the lead vocal. So take a listen to it here. So
knowing that somebody loves you. Don't it make you feel good? Knowing that somebody wants to give you their heart.
so this way you can kind of do, you know, lead vocals from background vocals. So, you know, I've had on other tracks, I had like did a really great job of being able to kind of split those apart. So, but it may vary depending upon the track, but you can do the new unmixed chorus module that could separate kind of lead vocals from background vocals within your project. Okay, so you see Gareth is experimenting with different controllers for his chord pads. Okay, so we see Clemens just says, hi again, Greg. Clicking the edit in WaveLab, the highlighted track will open in WaveLab automatically. Should I import the edited track back to Cubase? So you can. And there's a way to kind of just trigger that. So we come over, let's say I want to do my export audio mix down. We'll take this, let's go to WaveLab 12. Let me I'll just revert this project since I had just the particular spectral layers vocals open. All right, I'll show this quickly here. But let's say if you've made changes in WaveLab and you want that to automatically go back to Cubase, I'll show you how to do that quickly. All right, so I'll just do just a small section here. export to WaveLab. So if I was taking a file from WaveLab to Cubase, we could see this. Then, so let's say we do like a fade here. So let's do just a quick process. I'll reverse that section. Then try to remember where there's like a little icon where we could just trigger the update automatically back to Cubase as well. So once we've done an edit and a change here, there is, just looking for, here, I'll just close out of spectral layers. So I'm just blanking on where that little, there's a little icon that you could use to trigger, but it could be that this file was never in. So let's say if I take this file, because it's not residing in the program, but let's say if we now come here and we edit in WaveLab, okay, so now we will let's see if it shows up here. So let's say I want to do, so right here, this little icon here. So let's say if I reversed that audio, I think it's this one, that automatically triggers the change back in Cubase if that's a file that was resident in Cubase. So once you're in WaveLab, you'll see this little icon here, and that will trigger this file edit that was done in WaveLab back to the Cubase project here. So all right, Irving Novello asks, hi Greg, is there a way to unlink grid values from arrangement view to key editor? Okay, so let's say we're in bars and beats here, and if we go to the key editor, I could choose a different value here. So while we see bars and beats here we actually see seconds. So you could have different grid values. So you can see that while measure 17 right here doesn't equal 40 seconds. If I move to 40 seconds in the editor here, it's going to be between, not at measure 18, but somewhere in between. So that way, again, we could just kind of right click and have different time values for the editors versus the project windows. So let me know if that is what you're looking for, Irving. All right, JVI, just is watching football, you don't have to apologize for being late, but if you are late, you have to hit the like button. All right, so you see Gareth says seems to be a problem with his Samsung Graphite controller. All right, so we see from Ace, Greg goes to ETA and getting the code for redeeming the prize from the trivia contest. I've emailed Club Cubase my ID a few times, but no reply. So I'm just waiting for everyone to get theirs kind of sent in, and then we'll be able to get those processed. So it's much easier kind of doing it all at once as opposed to 5 separate ones. It's more apt to get messed up. So I think the one person we're waiting for is going to get theirs in tomorrow. Okay. Okay, inactive user asks, how can I cut my audio and paste it to match my BPM? So I want a perfect 8th note stutter. I don't know how my audio clips can snap to that 8th note at 120 beats per minute, for example. Okay, so let's come over here. We'll do a new project. All right, so let's say we want to do maybe like a vocal stutter type of effect.
Ooh. I'm the one that needed closure.
Okay, so let's say, all right, so she's going to say closure, and I want to kind of chop that up. So let's start this. Let's say,
I'm the one that needed closure.
Okay, so let's say I want the phrase closure to be, which I think starts right here. So I'm going to turn off my snap. All right, and I'm going to give this a little more space. So I'm going to just cut this and move this over to give it a little more space. So let's say I want to do just a quick kind of stutter thing on the clo. Okay, so when we look at this, so I'm going to put, it's probably going to be right at this, and I could actually kind of, so it's probably right there where closure starts. Okay, so I'm going to take this range here, and let's say I want to do 16th notes. So I'm going to turn on my snap, or 8th notes. So we can say that's an 8th note there. So what I want to do is just to take that particular range, and let's say I'm going to okay, so we're going to take this range here, and let's trim that. So I'm going to take this particular range and just hit Control D. So I've selected an 8th note range in time. So let's say if I have this set to use quantize, I'm going to say let's set our quantize here to an 8th note. Okay, so I'm going to trim this to like an 8th note. So I'm going to just select that with the range tool. And now I could just duplicate. So if I so we could just kind of do stuff like that. And if it doesn't fit, so let's say, you know, I didn't, like our vent was slightly shorter than an 8th note. So let's say I want to take this, but I want it an eighth note time. So use kind of the range tool. And as we come, we could have the range snap to an eighth note. So even if the event doesn't match, use the range tool and we'll select an eighth note. And again, the range tool is this second tool. And now we could duplicate that and have that perfectly on the grid. So now, or if you wanted to do a 16th note of that, so we could set our snap to follow the quantized value, and our quantized value will be set to 16th notes. So now we could just come over there and just do particular ranges as well. So set the range with the, set the length with the range tool, and then that will, as you duplicate, that will automatically duplicate that range based on the grid. So give that a try. Okay, Typhoon Williams says, "Hi Greg, I'm enjoying the stream as usual. I've been tracking some live musicians and need a quick audio quantize refresher. I was having trouble with warps." Okay, so Gareth will hate me for this. I had Gareth play, and this is a great skill set to do as such a great guitarist as Gareth is. And I asked him to play something that was really out of time. And I think he cringes every time I play this. But it's a great skill to have, to be able to play out of time on request. But I probably made a mistake too. So let's take a listen to the bass part here. All right, so we'll have this play with the drums. All right, so if you need to kind of quantize a bass part, when we go to just kind of the quantize panel, the first thing you want to do is just make sure that you have audio warp turned on. So let's say, okay, this is probably going to be more eighth notes. And if we look at in the sample editor here, when I just hit quantize, so we undo it, we can see that's done changes, especially probably right there. I was a little. So I was a little off there rhythmically. So if you needed to do just like a couple guitar parts that were maybe the they were a little early or a little late in the guitar, what you could do, what I like to do is first we'll set up just on the parts here. Anytime that you record in Cubase, it's automatically going to figure out the hit points. So if we go to like the sample editor, we can see our hit points, and we see that these are on the transients, and then we could go to create, and then we can say warp markers. Now when I go, if we wanted to kind of manually do this process, we can go to the warp tool and choose free warp. Now that we do this, we see these yellow lines. So at a certain zoom factor, you may not see the yellow lines because it would be just all yellow at a certain point. So those parts are selected. I'm going to zoom in, and we see this little tool. And when we see the tool, there's going to be a kind of a vertical line to the left of the arrows. It may be hard to see, but as I hover over a particular warp marker, we can see that that warp marker is going to turn white. And now I could adjust and have these automatically snap to the grid. So we could say, okay, I want my grid to be based on beat, or we could say based on quantize of an eighth note. So now I could move these, and we can see that they kind of almost will have a little detente, a little point where they'll just kind of snap rhythmically to the grid. So this way, and if you are adding points manually, you just want to make sure that you have a point before and after. Otherwise, the other points will get adjusted rhythmically as well. But do the hit points, take the hit points converted to warp markers, and then you could just kind of, as the warp marker turns white, that indicates that that's the warp marker that's going to be controlled. Then you can manually adjust it, or you try just audio quantizing. That will often fix a lot of stuff as well. So let me know if that makes sense for you, Typhoon. All right, Terrence Shaw says, hi Greg, siesta time here in El Salvador. I'm a bit slow. How do you find that clean J-bass sound in Hallion Sonic? So it's not included with Hallion Sonic, but it is included. It's included in the Absolute collection. It's an instrument called Steinberg Electric Bass. So if we go to add an instrument track, so we'll do it, we can play it in Hallion or Hallion Sonic. But I'll come here, scroll down to electric bass, and then you could just kind of come over here. So this doesn't come with Cubase, but you have kind of classic P bass, jazz bass, precision, Music Man, Rick type sounds, and you have. It is included within Absolute 6 and Absolute 5, which is kind of a collection of instruments that's great. But it's a really wonderful instrument. But it's not included with Cubase or Hallion. It's sold separately, but part of the Absolute collection. All right, so we have a question from Scion B. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to program the up-down movement of notes in Very Audio using arrow keys or mouse to a rotary encoder on my Midi controller? So I don't think so, but we'll give it a shot. Let's take a look at the bass part. So you could use the arrow keys to go up and down. I don't think that it works for, we'll just take a look. Yeah, so I don't think that there's a mappable function for that, that you could just have to use kind of the up and down arrow keys like so. So when you come here, sorry about that. All right, so we see JVI is like number 90. Thank you for that. All right, so we see from HSP Products, please have a problem in Steinberg Activation Manager. I activated the rental with purchase option to have Cubase with 2 different emails in Splice by mistake. How can I delete the expired product? So I think, you could be logged into one account at a time. So like, if we jump over to your My Steinberg account, once you log into one account, you're going to see what's in that account, and if you log out and log into your other account, you should see what's available in what's in that account. So I think being in the account that doesn't have so it says you activated the rental with purchase option, have Cubase with 2 different emails in Splice. So you may want to check, with Splice to see, if they're able to kind of help you with that. But I think I'm not sure if it's a Splice account manager issue or the Steinberg activation or your Steinberg account. But check with Splice to see if they're able to resolve it with your account. All right. Yeah, but check with Splice just to see, because on the Steinberg side, you can only be logged into one account at a time, and if you're logged into the account that doesn't have the inactive license, you shouldn't get any messages with it. So I think it might be you might have to check with Splice on that. All right, so we see from Irving Novella, it says, thank you, Greg. I meant to say quantizing values. It says, I want to view range in bars and a key editor in 1/8 if possible. So I think that when we go to that the quantized values are going to be the same. So, you could have the grid. Let's see if we can have the grid here set to bar. So now the grid, so the quantized values are going to be consistent throughout the program. So you can say, okay, when I change 1, it's going to be globally set. So if I change it in the project window, we can see it reflected here. But you can have independent, so here, but when we do grids, we could have that set to bar, and because we're not necessarily, and this, so let's come over here and say as we move, so say if I take this and I nudge, as we do this, we could have that set to different nudge values, but it's going to be one kind of, so now as I nudge, I can nudge in 1/8 notes, even though when I nudge here on the project window, I'll just try this here. When I nudge in the project window, it's going to be bars, but in the Midi window, when I nudge, we could have independent nudge factors. So now I'm not doing it in bars. I'm choosing to do my nudge factor in 1/8 notes. So the nudging can be independent, but the quantized values will be consistent and global, so that it's that's kind of the design intention with that. Okay, Amato Solo asks, I have 2 songs which I've edited in different projects with different tempo maps. How can I import them into a new project and preserve the tempo map? All right, so one of the things that we could do with tempo maps, so let's say we have a tempo map here, and I have, let's say this is song A tempo map. And what you could do is you could have track versions on tempos. So let's come over here. Let's say, okay, I want to do a new version. So now we could just switch back and forth between the different tempo maps. But let's do a quick experiment here. Let's do a new project. Okay, and I'm going to add a tempo map here. Okay, and we're going to call this, we'll save the project. Okay, and we're going to say, let's save this as tempo 2. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's do an import tracks from project. All right, and since we're in tempo 2, I'm going to import tempo 1, and I'm going to choose to take the tempo track. Usually we can, I was seeing if we could do it to all right, let's see what happens if we do this. Okay, so I'm going to undo that. So I'm going to make a new version. And now let's import that tempo track again. So I'm going to go import tracks from project. And we're going to go to tempo 1. Then I'm going to just import the tempo track. So I have that, and now I could go back to version 1's tempo and version 2's tempo. So if before, so you could create a new version from your tempo. So create a new version, and now we could go to import tracks from project, choose the project, do the tempo. It's going to import that tempo. And now you could just have multiple tempo maps if you needed, just by switching track versions in your project. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right, you see Gareth is going to feed his daughter. So say hi to Lola for us. Gareth is saying Michael Teams is on his way. Gareth saying, "Arg, that guitar." So I actually didn't play it for you. All right, so you see Ace Amadeus says, "Greg, thanks for all these awesome demos, replies, and tips, and great community input. Sped up my production by 500%. So. All right, so we have a question from Ace. It says, on drums, wave that speeds up and down, but should be a constant 120 beats per minute. What is the best way to correct the drummer's playing? The drums are speeding up and slowing down. What's the best way to keep them at a constant 120 beats per minute? Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look. Let's see if this is in my recent. Think so. So let me just open up project. Okay, so let's say we have a project here. So let's say we have a jazz project. And we put on our metronome. It's not following the metronome. So as we listen to it. So I'm going to select the drum overheads in this and do a tempo detection. So I'm going to go to my project menu and we will choose tempo detection. So I'm going to do an analysis of it, listen to it. All right, so it seems fine. So close that window, and as we've done this, it's kind of placed a it'll place a signature track event of 1/4. So I'm going to find the downbeat. All right, so let's just listen. We have pickup notes. Okay, so I'm going to now come here. Don't think I want it there. Let me just. Okay, so let's listen. We have our drum pickup notes now. So we can see, and drummers always love when you do this, is show them their tempo and how steady it is. They tend not to like that. All right. So we have our tempo track, and this is basically what the drums and the other tracks are following. So what I'm going to do now is select all of the events. We go to audio, and we're going to go to advanced and say set definition from tempo. And what this is going to do now is all the tempo changes that we see here in the left-hand side are now being embedded into the audio files. So, and it's basically, we're going to have, so let's say our tempo is roughly 137 to 144. I want this to play back a tempo perfectly of 140 beats per minute. So I'm going to turn off the tempo track and now just type in my tempo of 140. And now when I hit play, it's playing back all the tracks perfectly at 140 beats a minute. So perfectly steady. And what it's done is taken each track where it was speeding up and slowing down, it was off tempo. Every single beat is now stretching to be compliant to a steady tempo. I wanted to go back to the original tempo, I could activate the tempo map. And here we have kind of natural variations. It doesn't sound bad. But if I want it to be perfectly steady, so again, do a tempo detection. Place your 4/4 at the downbeat. Select all of the events. Go to audio, to advanced. Set definition from tempo. And then you could just turn the tempo track off, whereas playing the original musical variations, and then just type in the tempo field what you want the tempo to be, and then everything will be steady for you, Ace. All right. All right, so we see Typhoon Williams says exactly what I needed to know. We see Best Korean Jesus on. Glad you can make it today. Wonderful to see Mark Rabin on. This is wonderful to see you on the Zoom meetup on Friday. So we'll give a big woof to Stella. That's Mark's dog, if you don't know. It was great to see Stella on the live stream. All right, so Ace Amadeus just says, Greg, last week I asked about third-party VSTs. Yes, I realize there's no VST police. My question is, will Cubase reject or blacklist VST plugins that cause performance problems? Thanks. So there is a block list. So once we go to your studio and we go studio menu to VST plugin manager, so you can see the block list of plugins. So these may be some plugins that will be considered unstable or not optimized for the latest operating system. So you could just go to the block list here. VST2 plugins often will end up in a block list, but you could just do it right there. So, but yeah, you'll see, and as it scans, you'll get a message saying these plugins were added to the block list. All right, so Mark Rabin is suggesting everyone goes to Nick's YouTube channel and like all the tunes as a way to support our community. That's a great idea, Mark. All right, so Mark Rabin saying, thanks to Teddy Riley, you're super informative and gracious. Appreciate it. All right, Donnie asks, hi Greg, can you please give your contact info again so you can reach me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, Amato Solo says, thank you, but I want to import the audio to and play them one after the other while preserving the original tempo in a whole new project. So if you want to do that, let's say if I want to import multiple files and have them all be at their project, at their original tempo, all you'd have to do, so let's say if I'm playing, I'll just turn off the metronome, it's less annoying. And let's say I want to import audio files. So let me just so like if you wanted to import a bunch of so let's say I just want to take these 10 files and we could place it all on one track, and now all 10 files will be and then if you wanted to select all these and move them to measure 1, you could do that. But you know, when you do import files while it's playing, it will place the position based on the cursor position. So, but that way all those files, I just selected multiple files. When I imported it, I chose to do to one track, and it's preserving the original tempo. Wonderful to see Patrick W on. Says has been using Cubase for decades and I still learn stuff on these. Thanks, Greg. So I usually learn stuff on every live stream as well. So, but thank you for the kind words. See Daniel saying to Mark Ludmer, woof woof. So I think it's Mark Rabin who has a dog. Mark Ludmer may have a dog. Not sure. All right, so Amada Sella says, can you, going back to our tempo, says, can you please create a tempo 3 project and import tempo 1 and 2? So let's do a new project. So I'm going to import tracks from project. All right, so I'll before I do the, so we'll now come here. Before I do that, I will just, we'll save this project as tempo 3. And let's say tempo 3 has a tempo track in it. So we'll save. And I'll just make it just some obnoxious okay. Here, let me just save, sorry. All right, so now I want to import. So we're in tempo 3, so I'm going to make a new version. Import tracks from project. Tempo 1. So we're going to say signature. I'm sorry, the tempo track here. Let me just make sure there's an event in here maybe. Looks like it's being blocked for some reason. Let me just try a new project. Let me see if I... I'm not sure why that's kind of showing as blocked. It was working before. So let me just try. All right, so I'll activate the other project. So now it's showing up. All right, I'll undo that. So a brand new one, we could import the tempo. Now we will come over here to do a new version and import tracks project. Don't remember which one I imported, but so on a new project it works, but not from like a saved project. Let me just try an existing project, see. And here, so other existing projects, it seems to work fine. Not sure why it did it with that. But now we have kind of our original tempo here, tempo 1, tempo 2. So play with it some. I'll see if I can figure out what kind of the inconsistency was, why it wasn't allowing me to do it on the tempo 3 project, but all right. See, Daniel, sorry for tagging the wrong Mark, so no worry, Mark Ludmer is a great guy. See, Tim K says, I had a question, kind of mostly figured I hadn't got to that tutorial yet, and lo and behold, someone else's question and your answer hooked me up. Wrote my Midi arpeggio loop from Halley and Sonic. That's great. Thanks for letting us know. All right, Big Rat Studios, please can you educate me on various ways to program drums in Cubase? Yes, there's a lot of different great ways of doing it. So we'll start with a new project. Now let's add an instrument track to Groove Agent. Okay, so one way is a MIDI insert. So there's like a MIDI plugin that's programmable. So with one of the great things, if you use Groove Agent, you have obviously different sounds, but there's also something very powerful called drum maps. So in Groove Agent, we could automatically create drum maps from the instrument. So I'm going to go to what's called a MIDI insert, and we're going to select Beat Designer. Now here we could have, any numbers that we have, I think up to 64 different sounds. We could now come over here in all of our different patterns and samples. We can now just kind of trigger directly from Groove Agent. So let's say, okay, I want to have kick. We'll do a snare, clap. Let's do closed hi-hat and a couple of percussion. So say bongo 1 or just a bongo. And let's throw in maybe a triangle or something. Okay, we could set our number of steps. So let's say I want it to be like 2 measures long. So we have 16th note steps and we have 32 of them. So now I could just come in and I'll just raise the volume up here a little bit. Now if I want to adjust kind of my velocity, I could also just kind of come in and let's say I just want to move that here. So we could increase the velocity here. I'll decrease, and let's put in just a couple of and we could put in like a swing, so we could just kind of come over here to hi-hats only. So you could kind of build up variations like that. And let's say, okay, now I want to come here to this little drop down menu. I could copy this pattern, come over here, let's paste. And now I just want to have this be like 4 on the floor, kick drums. And so we have kind of variation. So we could now come to like maybe this is the verse, and we get to the chorus. We could just trigger these from different MIDI notes if we wanted to. Another method of doing this is you could also just kind of use the drum editor itself. So if I want to create an event, I could now just kind of program in. And what's cool about kind of the drum editor approach, and I'll just turn off the MIDI insert, is, you know, if we want to take just one measure here, so we'll start off, and again, just kind of like what we're doing before. And we could adjust the velocity. And let's say I want to put in 30, I want to start off with like a 16th note hi-hat pattern. And now I want to switch it to 32nd notes. And let's come over, let's say I want to go to my bongos, and I want these to be 8th note triplets. And let's adjust the velocity of these different drums. It's not all boring. And maybe I want this to be half note triplets on that. So play around with velocities, but you could come up with very easy I want to take these and move it to claps. So you could do stuff like that very easily and build up drum patterns in Cubase. So very fast and creative. All right, so we see Daniel says, I saw you work with the drum editors. Actually, any use in Beat Designer? I like it because it reminds me of FL. So, you know, the drum editor is going to be, you know, like how I would approach it. Like, you know, maybe if I wanted to easily build up like a one pattern thing that was going to be repeating, the Beat Designer is really good for that. The drum editor is actually going to be, you know, linear in the project window. So these events are going to exist in the project window. We could drag the patterns here. So if I have my cursor, say at measure 2, we could just say insert pattern at cursor. And we could take this particular pattern and drop it right in to the cursor. So we could do that. But, you know, the drum editor also gives you flexibility for having different rhythmic feels. And we could remap notes and even choose to send it to different drum instruments as well. So they both have their place. You know, whatever gets you to the end zone or the finish line, you know, whichever one does it, they'll both work. So. All right, so we see from Robert Moyle, Greg, you are wonderful. Thanks for the kind words. Thanks for all you do. Question, if you could pick any computer setup to use a Cubase 13 and a UA Apollo and feel confident you'd have no issues, what would you pick? You know, I'm kind of different. I use a Mac for work stuff, and I use my personal studio. I have kind of an i9 PC with 128 gigs of RAM. I don't have any experience with the Universal Audio Apollos. I have kind of the Steinberg AXR interface, which is, goes up to 384K and all sorts of pretty phenomenal features with that, with Rupert Neve Silk processing built in. But yeah, I think, if you're going Mac, obviously the Apple Silicon is very powerful, but make sure that you get more of the performance cores versus efficiency cores. So some of the newer Macs, while they, can on paper look like they have greater performance, can actually be outperformed by an M1 or M2 because the M1s, M2s have more performance cores. So be aware of that. I kind of like, personally, I don't like planned obsolescence. So like I could have a PC for 10 years and I may do minor upgrades and still kind of have the same PC, and I don't worry about Microsoft, killing technologies on me or ports. So I've been bitten with my work computers, and I've seen other people, all of a sudden, like, your FireWire port doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. It's not on your system, but, I could still run FireWire on my Windows machine, but trying to get it working on a Mac could be problematic. So I kind of like, personally, the freedom of choice and the options that Windows gives me. So, but if I was looking for just like a quick laptop that worked great without issues, I think the MacBook Pros are great for that, but, err on the side of performance cores. But I think, there's so many great systems that are available now, and that, even a modest computer could give you great results. And check out, the AMD stuff as well. The Ryzen stuff is pretty phenomenal and very cost effective. All right, Donnie asks, is there a way to use both VST2 and VST3 when running Cubase native Mac? I only see VST3s, thanks. So VST2 will never work as being native Apple Silicon. It was discontinued. VST3 came out in 2008. So, I think just about all of the plugin manufacturers, the big holdout for the longest time was Universal Audio, but they've released VST3 versions of basically all their plugins, but VST2s won't run natively in Apple Silicon. We're not going to go back and update technology that hasn't been updated since 2008 for it. So that's why it's just by design that VST2 won't work natively on Mac OS. So. Mark Raven says, Stella's right here. She probably knows more about Cubase than any other dog. That's a good point. All right, so we see Rob's has got his HSO issue resolved quickly in the Steinberg chat. Thanks for your directions. So glad you got it sorted out during the live stream. That's always a wonderful feeling. Nick is checking in from Essex. Says he definitely didn't fall asleep in the back of class. So that's good. It's late there. Night school is tough. All right, sorry, Chatfield just jumped. Gareth says, big thanks to Greg for being a legend. I'm just a guy that talks and moves a mouse and hits some buttons on a keyboard. But thank you for the kind words. All right, Gareth says he's breakdancing in Bilbao, so that's good to know. All right, so Millard Brown says, thanks, Greg, and our amazing live stream. So it's always better when you're on, so it's great to see you back on more recently. Pablo, wonderful to see Pablo on. He says, I need more bongo. Pablo is an amazing drummer from Galicia, España, who plays with Hot Mess. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is dropping in, says he has to go to the hospital for his dad, so we hope your dad's doing okay. Give him our best. Pablo is going to now add a triangle in his drum setup. All right. Reading through comments. Flyview says, gotta love building drum patterns. Oh, finally we have Michael Teams joining us. So it's the first time I think Pablo has beat Michael Teams to the live stream, but it's so wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. Hope you're well. Everyone was, Uno Momento is missing his ice cream. Okay, reading through comments still. Mark Raven says, Greg, you're way more than average computer user. You're the librarian, the scholar, and the scientist, and especially the professor. It doesn't impress my wife, though. So, but thank you. Those are very kind words. It means a lot. All right, so you see Gareth says the chord pads are working fine now, so that's great to hear. All right, so I think we're at the end of the questions. I know we had a couple of questions that were mailed in advance. Let me open those up. And again, you could email questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see I have a question. Hi, Greg. I came across a post in the forum where one of the reps mentioned that Steinberg is working on a version compliant with Windows 11 dark mode. I wanted to know if there's any update on that. So nothing that I know has been officially announced. Usually Steinberg is pretty good at not contributing to the anticipation factor, we'll call it, of kind of teasing features well in advance of release. Steinberg usually does a good job of, I don't think it does a lot of good, bragging about stuff that's coming out months later. Doesn't help the user. So a lot of times the product announcements will come when it's ready and available to the market, so that it's not just kind of a tease to the customer. So, but nothing has been announced that I've seen officially. But when there's a new version out, we'll see that's when the announcements are made, usually not pre-announcements. All right, so I had a brain cramp on Friday about using the vocoder. So let's go over that. How to get it routed. So we'll show that quickly. Okay, so we'll kind of start from scratch here. I'll remove these. I'm just going to take a look at the patch name I use in this. Okay. Okay, so let's say we want to set up the vocoder and use it on a track. It's often going to be used with vocals, and we can make vocals sound a bit more interesting. So let's say we have just a little vocal ad lib here from. Okay, so we're going to install just a quick on an insert. We're going to go under pitch shift and we'll see vocoder. Now we could have this set to fixed, which is probably doesn't make much sense. So if we play, we could have this play back on a fixed pitch. All right, but where it gets kind of more interesting is when we send a MIDI track to it. So I'm going to now just come right over here. Let's add a MIDI track. Where I was having my brain cramp is it's the output, not the input. So here we'll see for the R&B vocals, we have the vocoder as the sidechain input. So we're going to just set that. And now we could set the MIDI to external. So as we play, I could play chords now. And we'll make sure that all right. Oh, okay, I'll turn this on, that will help. So now as I play chords, so we could basically kind of use the vocoder as its own internal instrument, and as we send MIDI to it, at this point we can now, so even if I come now and we'll turn on the virtual keyboard as we play. But where it gets also interesting is, let's say we want to send kind of the synthesis part to a virtual instrument. So at this point, what we could do is right click. I'm going to add an instrument track. We'll do, let's say, Retrolog. And on the output, I'm going to activate the side chain of the vocoder plugin. And on the output for the virtual instrument here, instead of it going to stereo out, I'm going to send this to the side chain. So as we now send MIDI to this, we could actually and so if we want to try different patches here, so this way we could use route the vocoder to a virtual instrument. And then, so you could have a lot of flexibility with the vocoder, but when you do this, you want to basically add a MIDI track and send the output, not the input. That's where I was having my brain cramp moment on Friday, but send that output to the vocoder, and that will automatically show up when the vocoder is enabled. So you could use kind of the internal sounds of the vocoder, or by adding a virtual instrument, activating the side chain, taking the output of that instrument to the side chain, we could then route the vocoder to a virtual instrument and have even more flexibility with the system. All right, so I think we got the next question already answered. Let me jump back to live questions. Bear with me just a minute. I'll change back. All right, just trying to find my spot here. All right. All right, so Big Rat Studios says, please can you show more light on how to use the chord pad in Cubase? Okay, so we talked about it a little earlier, but let's go ahead and take a look. So if we're kind of starting with the chord pad, you know, we can come over. I'm just going to add a quick instrument track here. All right, so let's say like I'm a bass player and I have really bad piano playing skills. So, and I should practice, and I took class piano in college, but I want to be able to come over and I'm going to activate the chord pads, and I could try out different chord ideas. And if we want to, you know, add more chords, and we could also, you know, very easily come over here and say, okay, let's go from a list of chords. We could also look based on kind of our key and musical proximity, so we could audition. So if I say, wow, I really like that chord, so let me double click, and we could just, I'm gonna, you know, we could, if we have this pad cleared, which we could do, so let me just, you know, we could add chords. We could see these chords in, if we want to see a list of chords, or again, the circle of fifths, we can see it kind of internally here, so we can see for major, minor. If we want to see, you know, again, just straight chord editor that we could build chords. We could also choose to see this in note name. We can see Roman numerals. So if you're going to go back to what my college music theory was, or if you're in Nashville, you could have the Nashville chord system. But what we're able to do now is just kind of come over here, and if you're just kind of trying out different chord ideas, I could hit record and now, if so, we could record kind of the playing chords, and instead of me playing chords, I could just play a MIDI note that triggers these chords. And if we wanted to, we could also come over, instead of playing chords, we could do patterns. So we could say, okay, let's come over to a pattern. Let's load up some patterns. So let's say, okay, let's do piano. So let's say, okay, maybe I'm not a good mambo piano player. So now I could record, and let's say I put my click on. So we could just kind of come over here. And then you can say, okay, I want to modulate. So I could just come right here. Let's modulate up. And now it's recorded as if I recorded all this data, as if I cleverly was able to perform that, kind of like my friend Clay does, Clay Oswald, who's on the live stream last week. But all these parts can now be played. So if you don't have great keyboard skills, you could just trigger chords. Each of those chords could trigger patterns, and you could just trigger it with a single MIDI event. right. Tim Weinheimer is asking if my wife is Shania Twain, so no. She's probably a little cooler. So Daniel asks, Greg, what is the meaning of life? I guess it's helping others and sharing knowledge if you have knowledge to share. And be kind. You see Michael Pierce is jumping off, but he's going to be doing a session with Steve Allen next week. Hope your session goes well. All right, you see Michael Teams has granted my family and myself 1 gallon of limoncello ice cream. Sounds lovely for today. Thank you very much. All right, reading through comments. Michael Teams is catching up on his ice cream distributions. Tim Weinheimer says, wow, I didn't know you could do that with the vocoder. All right, Amato Solo says, I figured out how to import 2 tracks on a new project with preserving their own tempo maps. Thank you for laying the foundations for me. So glad I was able to help. All right, Hot Iron Aircraft Shop says, just joined. Is there a specific topic at hand, or are you just taking general questions about Cubase? So we just answer people's questions about Cubase. So any questions you have, it's not really like an agenda-based thing where we're going to show you this. It's kind of live Q&A. See, Tim Weinheimer was great and practiced his piano for 2 hours today. So I got to play a little bass this morning. I'll be doing a gig with a friend from college next month. Good for you, Tim, for your practice. All right, we see that Mark Raven's taking his dog Stella to the river to swim. Sounds great. Michael Team says, I am strong in the force. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters made it. I thought your Sable was great. Sent a wonderful email to Teddy Riley. So thanks for copying me on that. It was a great email, Stable. All right, let's see if there's any other questions that pop up. We may be ending the. You see Big Rat Studio says, thanks for helping out with my questions. It's kind of what we do twice a week. And again, for those people that are in the U.S. wondering if we're having the live stream on Friday, since most people are taking off, we will have the live stream on Friday. So just a quick heads up with that. I will be on the 12th. I have a personal thing I need to do, so we won't have a live stream on July 12th. And the week of July 22nd, I'll be on vacation just for 1 week. So just a heads up with that. All right, so we'll see if there's any more questions that sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up just 2 or 3 minutes early than we usually do. Thank you for all of the wonderful questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. And if you have, make sure you hit the like button, tell your friends about the live streams, let other people know. And you could always send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And again, I feel so grateful for being a part of such a wonderful community. And so All right, so we have a question that came in from Edu Martins from Brazil. Is there a way to render Groove Agent drums into separate audio channels? Okay, so we'll show this. So it's all based upon like the output routing. Okay, so I'm going to Okay, so I'm going to play this particular pattern. All right, and what I'm going to do is take, so I'm going to take this kick and send it to output 2, this kick to output 2, and let's say my snare and clap to output 3. And my hi-hat to output 4. So when we see that I could solo just the kicks, just the hi-hat, just the snares and claps, and just the hats. So what I'm going to do now is, now that I have this routing selected, we'll go to our edit menu to render in place. We're going to choose our channel settings, and now we hit render. And with that, we now have your kick, your snare, and your hi-hats all rendered. So route them to individual outs. If you're in a beat agent kit, what you need to do the outputs is just in the mixer. Here's where we could set the outputs, but set it to different outputs and then render in place, and each of the outputs will be rendered as individual files. So with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions, and we'll see everyone back here on Friday. Thank you very much. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy. Goodbye.